The life insurance barely covered the funeral costs. After 42 years of marriage, I found myself alone in our small house in Medford, Oregon, trying to figure out how to stretch a teacher's pension that suddenly felt impossibly thin. I was 63 years old, and for the first time since I was 20, I needed to find a job. That's how I ended up working the evening shift at Riverside Medical Center, 3 nights a week in the billing department. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me busy, kept my mind from wandering to the empty chair at the dinner table. The shift ended at 11:30, and I'd catch the last bus home, arriving just after midnight. Except the bus schedule changed that September. Budget cuts, they said. The last bus now left at 11, a full half hour before my shift ended. I couldn't afford to leave early and lose those hours, so I did what I had to do. I started using a rideshare app my daughter had installed on my phone. That's how I met Raymond. The first time his silver Toyota pulled up to the hospital's staff entrance, I almost didn't get in. He looked to be in his late 50s, with gray threading through his dark hair and deep lines around his eyes. But his rating was 5 stars, and it was nearly midnight in a poorly lit parking lot, so I climbed into the back seat and gave him my address on Cedar Street. "Long shift?" he asked, his voice kind. "Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday," I replied, watching the familiar streets of Medford pass by the window. "How long have you been driving?" "About 3 years now," he said. "Lost my job at the timber mill when it closed. This keeps me afloat." Something in his voice made me look up, really look at him in the rearview mirror. He had the same worn expression I saw in my own reflection, the look of someone who'd been knocked down by life, but kept getting back up because what else was there to do? "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. He glanced at me in the mirror, and I saw surprise flicker across his face. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Most people don't." "Well, thank you, ma'am." "Carol," I corrected. "My name is Carol." "Raymond," he replied, and I saw the ghost of a smile. After that, something strange started happening. 3 nights a week, I'd request a ride, and 3 nights a week, Raymond's silver Toyota would be the car that accepted. At first, I thought it was coincidence. But by the 3rd week, I realized he was waiting, logging on around 11:20, positioning himself near the hospital, making sure he'd be the one to pick me up. We fell into a comfortable routine. I'd slide into the back seat, exhausted from 8 hours of medical billing codes and insurance claims, and Raymond would already have my address plugged in. We'd talk during the short 12-minute drive to my house. Nothing deep at first. Just the weather, the traffic, how our days had been. But gradually, week by week, the conversations deepened. I learned that Raymond's wife had left him 2 years ago, taking their grown daughter with her. Not out of anger, but out of exhaustion with their financial struggles. He lived alone now in a small apartment near the highway, driving for various rideshare companies 6 days a week, sometimes 12 hours a day. "My daughter just had a baby," he told me one October night, his voice thick. "A little girl. I've only seen pictures." Without thinking, I reached forward and squeezed his shoulder. "She'll come around," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "Babies have a way of bringing families back together." He cleared his throat. "That's kind of you to say." I started tipping him extra. Not much. Just a few dollars more than my usual, but enough that he'd notice. He tried to refuse at first, but I insisted. "You're keeping an old woman safe," I'd say. "That's worth something." The truth was, those 3 rides a week had become the highlight of my lonely schedule. Raymond never pitied me, never treated me like a burden. He just listened when I needed to talk, and stayed quiet when I needed silence. In November, I started bringing him coffee. Just a simple cup from the hospital cafeteria, still hot when his car pulled up. The first time I handed it to him through the window, he stared at it like I'd given him gold. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "I know," I replied, "but the night shift makes terrible hospital coffee bearable, and I figured you could use it more than I could." After that, the coffee became part of our routine. I'd climb in with 2 cups, and we'd drive through the quiet Medford streets, sipping our drinks and talking about everything and nothing. He told me about the strange passengers he'd picked up, the late-night conversations, the surprising cross-section of humanity he met in his car. I told him about my husband, about learning to live alone, about my daughter who called every Sunday but lived 3 states away in Colorado. "You're a good person, Carol," Raymond said one night in late November, pulling up to my house. "I want you to know that." I felt tears prick my eyes. "So are you, Raymond." December arrived with unusual cold for Oregon, frost coating my front lawn in the mornings. The hospital decorated for Christmas, tinsel and lights in the cafeteria that made the sterile building feel almost warm. I brought Raymond hot chocolate instead of coffee, and he laughed when he saw the little candy cane I'd taped to the cup. "My wife used to do things like this," he said softly. "Small kindnesses. I didn't appreciate them enough at the time." "You appreciate them now," I replied. "That's what matters." It was a Thursday night, December 14th, when everything changed. Raymond picked me up as usual, but something was different. His hands gripped the steering wheel too tight, and he kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. Not in his usual friendly way, but with an intensity that made my stomach clench. "Carol," he said as he pulled away from the hospital, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." My throat went dry. "What is it?" "Your neighbor. The man who lives 3 houses down from you, gray 2-story with the red truck in the driveway. Do you know him well?" I blinked, completely blindsided by the question. "Thomas? Thomas Brennan? Not really. We wave when we see each other, but we've never had a real conversation. Why?" Raymond didn't answer immediately. He turned left instead of right, heading away from my street. "Raymond, where are we going?" "Somewhere we can talk." His voice was tight. "Carol, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." Fear spiked through me. "You're scaring me." "I know. I'm sorry. But you need to hear this." He pulled into the empty parking lot of a closed grocery store, put the car in park, and turned to face me fully. In the harsh glow of the lot's security lights, his face looked haggard. "I picked up Thomas Brennan last week," Raymond said. "Saturday night, around 10:30. He was drunk, very drunk, and drunk people talk." I waited, my heart hammering. He was on his phone the whole ride, arguing with someone. At first, I tried not to listen, professional courtesy. But then I heard him say, "Your address. Your exact address, Carol." And he was angry. "I don't understand," he said. And these were his exact words. "The old lady at 847 Cedar is going to be a problem. She sees too much. We need to handle it before she figures it out and goes to the cops." The world tilted. "What?" "There's more." Raymond pulled out his phone, his hands shaking slightly. I started paying attention after that. Professional habit from my old security job at the mill. I started keeping track. That man, Thomas Brennan, I've picked him up 7 times in the last month. Always late at night, always drunk, always on his phone having these intense conversations. He swiped through his phone, showing me a list of times and dates logged in a notes app. "Last night, I picked him up again. He was talking about you again, Carol," he said. "She works late Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays. House is empty. I've been watching." Ice flooded my veins. "He's been watching my house?" "I think so. And I think there's more going on than just watching." Raymond's face was grim. 2 nights ago, I drove past your street on my way home. I saw his truck parked 2 houses down from yours at 2 in the morning. Just sitting there, lights off, engine running. Why would he? I couldn't finish the sentence. "I don't know. But Carol, I need you to not go home tonight. Please." "Where am I supposed to go?" "A hotel, a friend's house, your daughter's place if you can. Anywhere but Cedar Street." He reached back and handed me his phone. "These are all my notes. Times, dates, things he's said. I think you need to go to the police." My hands shook as I took the phone. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I wasn't sure at first. I thought maybe I was being paranoid, reading too much into drunk rambling. But tonight, Carol, tonight I drove past your street again before picking you up. His truck was parked in front of your house, and I saw him get out and try your front door. The coffee I'd drunk earlier threatened to come back up. He tried my door. It was locked, thank God. But he stood there for almost a minute, jiggling the handle, looking in the windows. Then he went back to his truck and just sat there, watching your house. That's when I knew I had to tell you." "But why? What have I done to him?" I barely know the man. I don't know, Raymond said. But I think we need to find out, and I think we need to do it safely, which means you can't go home. I sat there in his car, in that empty parking lot, my whole world spinning. A man I'd waved to pleasantly for the past 2 years had apparently been plotting something sinister. And the only reason I knew was because of a rideshare driver I'd shown basic human kindness to. The Medford Inn, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Take me there. I'll stay tonight, and tomorrow I'll go to the police. No, Raymond said firmly. We go to the police now. Tonight, it's almost midnight. Carol, this man tried your door tonight, while you were at work. What if he comes back? What if he has a key somehow? Raymond's voice rose with urgency. We need to report this now. He was right. I knew he was right. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in the Medford Police Department, a young officer taking our statement while an older detective listened with increasing interest. I told them about my routine, about barely knowing Thomas Brennan. Raymond pulled up his detailed logs, every ride, every fragment of conversation he'd documented. And you're certain he said, handle it? The detective asked, his gray eyebrows furrowed. Positive, Raymond replied. I started recording the rides after the second time, just audio for my own protection. I can play them for you. The detective's eyes sharpened. You have recordings? Yes, sir. I keep them for safety, in case there's ever an incident in my car. Passengers sign a consent when they request the ride. It's in the app's terms of service. I hadn't known that. The detective pulled out a laptop, and Raymond transferred the audio files. We sat there in that sterile police interview room, listening to Thomas Brennan's slurred voice talking about me, about my house, about handling the situation. The detective's face grew grimmer with each recording. Mrs. Carroll, he said when the last file finished, do you have any idea what Mr. Brennan might think you've seen or know about? Nothing, I insisted. I work at the hospital 3 nights a week. I come home and sleep. That's my entire life. I don't even know what the man does for a living. The detective exchanged a glance with the younger officer. He works at Riverside Medical Center, he said slowly. In maintenance. Night shift. My blood ran cold. What? You've never seen him there? The hospital employs 400 people. I work in billing in the basement. I barely see anyone except my immediate coworkers. But even as I said it, something tickled at the back of my memory. A janitor I'd passed in the hallway sometimes, always around 11:15 when I was heading out. A man with a rolling cart, always wearing a baseball cap pulled low. I'd never looked at his face, never paid attention. The basement, I said slowly. Where the billing department is. He cleans there, doesn't he? The detective nodded. According to his work schedule, he's assigned to the basement level, administrative offices and records storage. Records storage, I repeated. And then it clicked. Oh my God. The missing files. Everyone in the room turned to look at me. 3 weeks ago, I said, my words tumbling out faster now. My supervisor noticed discrepancies. Patient files that were billed but the physical records were missing. Just random files, nothing that seemed connected. We thought it was a filing error, that someone had misplaced them. We've been doing an audit, going through everything manually. The detective leaned forward. What kind of files? Elderly patients, Medicaid patients, people who probably wouldn't notice or complain about billing errors. I felt sick. We haven't found them yet. The audit is still ongoing. But if someone was systematically stealing files and submitting false insurance claims, that would be healthcare fraud, the detective finished. Federal offense, serious prison time. And if he knew you were part of the audit team, the younger officer added, and he thought you were getting close to figuring out it was him, the room went silent. He works nights, I whispered. He has access to everything after hours. And I leave at 11:33 times a week, the same schedule every week. He could watch my routine, know when I'm not home, know when to... I couldn't finish. Destroy evidence, Raymond said quietly. He's been trying to get into your house to see if you've brought any work home, if you have files or notes that could connect him to the theft. The detective stood up abruptly. We need to search his property. Now. And Mrs. Carroll, you're not going home tonight. We'll put you in a hotel under protective watch until we can sort this out. Everything happened quickly after that. The detective made phone calls, waking up judges for search warrants. Another officer drove me to a hotel, while Raymond stayed to give additional statements. I sat in that generic hotel room, curtains drawn, unable to sleep, jumping at every sound in the hallway. My phone rang at 6 in the morning. The detective. "We found them," he said without preamble. Boxes of patient files in his garage, over 300 files spanning 2 years, and evidence of fraudulent billing claims totaling over $200,000. I sat down hard on the hotel bed. Oh my God! He's been arrested. He'll be charged with healthcare fraud, attempted burglary, and stalking. You're safe, Mrs. Carroll. You can go home. But I didn't feel safe. I felt shattered, violated. A man I'd waved to cheerfully had been plotting to break into my home, possibly to threaten me or worse, all because I was unknowingly close to exposing his crimes. Raymond picked me up from the hotel that morning. No fare, no app request. He just showed up because somehow he knew I'd need a familiar face. We drove through Medford in the early morning light, neither of us speaking for a long time. "How did you know?" I finally asked. "How did you know to pay attention, to write it all down?" He was quiet for a moment, his hands steady on the wheel. "My daughter," he said finally. "Before my wife left, before everything fell apart, my daughter had a boyfriend. Nice guy, we all thought. Successful, charming. Until one day she mentioned he'd been driving past her apartment at odd hours, that he always seemed to know where she was. I watched his face in the rearview mirror. I didn't pay enough attention," Raymond continued, his voice thick with old regret. "I told her she was being paranoid. And then, one night, he broke into her apartment. Hurt her pretty badly. That's when my wife finally had enough of me, of my inability to protect our family. She took our daughter and left, and I don't blame her." Raymond. "So now I pay attention," he said firmly. "I listen when drunk people talk. I notice when someone mentions the same address multiple times, when they talk about watching someone, handling someone. Because I failed once, and I won't fail again." Tears streamed down my face. "You saved my life. You saved mine first," he replied quietly. "You treated me like I mattered, like I was worth talking to instead of just a service. You brought me coffee and asked about my day. Do you know how rare that is? Most passengers don't even look at me, Carol. I'm just the driver. But you saw me. You saw me. So I made sure to see you too." We pulled up to my house on Cedar Street. In the morning light, it looked ordinary, safe. But I knew I'd never feel quite the same way about it again. 3 houses down, police tape cordoned off the gray 2-story with the red truck in the driveway. "Carol," Raymond said as I gathered my things, "I want you to have my personal number. Not the app, my actual cell phone. You call me anytime, day or night, if you need anything at all." I took the card he handed me. "I will. And Raymond, thank you. For everything. Thank you," he replied, and I saw his eyes were wet too, for reminding me why the work matters. The police investigation took weeks. They uncovered Thomas Brennan's entire operation, how he'd been stealing files for over 2 years, submitting false claims for procedures never performed, pocketing the insurance payouts. My role in the audit had indeed put me on his radar, and his drunk conversations in Raymond's car revealed he'd been planning to search my house for any evidence I might have taken home, then handle me if I became too much of a problem. I testified at his trial. Raymond testified too, his detailed logs and audio recordings becoming key evidence. Brennan was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Through it all, Raymond kept driving me to work and back 3 nights a week. But now I sat in the front seat, and we were no longer just driver and passenger. We were friends. Bonded by circumstance and choices both of us had made to show up for another human being. 6 months after Brennan's arrest, Raymond's daughter called him. She'd heard about the case, read about his testimony in the news. The way he'd protected a stranger when he'd failed to protect her haunted her, she said, but in a good way, in a healing way. "She wants me to meet my granddaughter," he told me one Tuesday night, his voice breaking with joy. "She says maybe it's time to try being a family again." I squeezed his hand across the console. "That's wonderful. It's because of you," he insisted. "All of it. If you hadn't been kind to me, if you hadn't made me feel seen, I wouldn't have been paying attention. I would have just been another driver taking a drunk guy home, tuning out his rambling. But you taught me that small kindnesses matter, that people matter. and that saved both of us. I think about that a lot now. How a few dollar tip and a cup of hospital coffee created a ripple effect that ended up saving my life and healing Raymond's family. How we never know the impact our small choices make, the lives we touch when we simply choose to see people as human beings worthy of dignity and kindness. I'm 64 now. Still working 3 nights a week at Riverside Medical Center, still living in my small house on Cedar Street, but I'm not lonely anymore. Raymond and I have dinner every Sunday with his daughter and granddaughter. They call me Aunt Carol, this makeshift family we've built from shared trauma and unexpected grace. Last week, a new billing clerk started in my department, young and overwhelmed. I saw her struggling with the codes, saw her eyes fill with frustrated tears. So I brought her coffee on her second day, sat with her during break, told her it would get easier. "Thank you," she whispered, looking at me with such gratitude. "You have no idea how much this means." But I do. I know exactly what small kindnesses can mean. I know how a moment of seeing someone, really seeing them, can change the trajectory of a life. Because I gave a rideshare driver coffee and conversation, he was paying attention the night it mattered most. And because he was paying attention, we both found our way back to the living,